The glass caught the sunlight as though it had been polished for a crown. Champagne fizzed to the rim, trembling in my son's hand. He offered it to me with a smile that reminded me of his childhood, the one I used to recognize before money turned him into someone else. To Mom, David said, his voice practiced, the kind you use at board meetings when you need investors to believe in you. To her strength, her recovery, and the future. Vanessa touched her flute to his. Her diamond sparked brighter than the sea around us. She didn't look at me, she looked through me, the way people do when they've already decided you no longer matter. The yacht hummed beneath my feet, all white leather and gleaming chrome, a floating shrine to excess. I adjusted the scarf over my still tender hip, reminding myself that I was only weeks past surgery. This outing was supposed to be a gesture of love, a sign that after my husband Robert's death, we could be a family again. I raised my glass, but my hand shook, betraying nerves I couldn't explain. Maybe it was the way the wind carried only half of David's words, or how Vanessa's smile held none of the warmth her lips suggested. They clinked my glass for me. "Drink, Mom," David urged. I sipped, the bubbles sharp against my tongue, and for one fleeting second I let myself believe him. That he meant it. That this was a beginning, not an ending. But endings have a way of arriving quietly, tucked inside gestures that feel almost ordinary. Vanessa slipped behind me, her perfume cutting through the salt air. Her voice brushed my ear. "Do you hear them, Margaret?" I frowned. "Hear who?" "The sharks." The ocean stretched endless and blue. I searched the water, confused, until her hands met my shoulders with the gentlest of pressure. Not a shove. Just enough. The world tipped. The deck vanished. Sky, then sea. The glass shattered on the teak before my scream was swallowed by the Atlantic. Cold. Brutal cold that clawed at my lungs. My dress dragged me down like an anchor, twisting around my legs. I fought upward, broke the surface, choked on salt. The yacht towered above me, its white hull blazing in the sunlight. And there they were. My son, my flesh and blood, gripping the rail. His mouth moved, panic on his face, horror even, but his feet didn't move. He didn't dive. He didn't reach. Beside him, Vanessa lifted her phone. Recording. Always recording. The engines roared, drowning my cries. The boat pulled away. My son did not look back. And in that instant, clarity cut through the water's chill. They had decided I was worth more dead than alive. But the ocean hadn't claimed me yet. Not yet. Salt burned my throat as I thrashed against the weight of my dress. The yacht was already shrinking, its white silhouette slicing toward the horizon. For a moment, I thought of Robert, his steady hands guiding me through morning laps, his laugh echoing off pool tiles. If he were here, he'd tell me not to panic. To count strokes. To keep rhythm. But Robert was gone. And the child I raised had left me to drown. The Atlantic doesn't care about mothers or sons. It pulls you down with equal indifference. I kicked hard, shoes slipping free, lungs aching as icy water seeped into my bones. Each gasp of air came jagged, laced with terror. Yet beneath the fear sat something colder than the ocean, betrayal. How long had they planned this? How many dinners had we shared while they rehearsed my death in their minds? David's smile, Vanessa's thin kindness, how had I mistaken those for love? A dark shape passed beneath me, slick and immense. My heart seized. Vanessa's whisper came back, cruel and unshakable. The sharks. I clawed at the waves, scanning desperately, when a sound cut through the wind, an engine. Smaller, rougher, closer. I twisted, nearly swallowing another mouthful of salt, and there it was, an old fishing trawler, rust flaking along its hull, bearing down on my flailing figure. Over here. My voice cracked raw, a rasp lost to the surf. Still, the boat slowed. A figure leaned over the rail, sunburnt skin weathered like driftwood. White hair whipped in the wind. Hang on. A rope snaked toward me. I lunged, fingers slipping once, twice, before locking around the coarse braid. Arms burned as I clung. Strong hands gripped the line, hauling me upward, until the world flipped from water to wood. I collapsed onto the deck, coughing seawater into puddles. Above me stood the man, 60, maybe 70, with eyes like the ocean at dawn, steady, unyielding. Beside him, a boy no older than 16 stared, wide-eyed and silent. "What the hell were you doing out here?" the man demanded, kneeling to wrap me in a blanket that smelled of salt and engine grease. "My family," I rasped. The word stuck in my throat. "They left me." The boy shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his grandfather. The man studied me longer, his expression sharpening as though weighing truth against madness. "No family leaves someone to drown," he muttered. "They just did," I whispered. Silence pressed between us, broken only by gulls overhead. The man finally nodded, grim and certain. "Name's Jake. This here's Tyler. You're safe now." But if what you're saying is true, his gaze cut to the horizon, where the yacht had vanished. "You've got bigger problems than the sea." I pulled the blanket tighter, trembling not from cold but from the realization that survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And if my son thought the ocean had swallowed me, then maybe, just maybe, that mistake could be my weapon. Jake's kitchen smelled of black coffee and seawater. I sat hunched at his worn oak table, steam from the mug rising into my face while my damp dress hung across a chair like the skin of a shed animal. Tyler moved about quietly, ladling stew from a dented pot, pretending not to watch me with that frightened curiosity teenagers reserve for ghosts. On the old radio, static faded into a clipped newscaster's voice. "Authorities confirm that Margaret Harrison, widow of tech magnate Robert Harrison, is presumed drowned following a tragic accident off the coast of Massachusetts. Family members report she had been recovering from surgery and may have been disoriented. Coast Guard continues search efforts though." My name. My obituary spoken aloud while I sat breathing at the table. The spoon slipped from my fingers, clattering against the wood. For a moment I wasn't in Jake's kitchen, I was in my old dining room, Robert at the head of the table, David sulking about curfew. Memory and reality collided until I couldn't tell which was worse, the grief of losing Robert or the knowledge that David had chosen to lose me. "They've buried me already," I whispered. Jake switched off the radio. His eyes carried no pity, only a kind of quiet respect. "World thinks you're gone. That's power if you want it." The idea rooted in me instantly, terrifying and electrifying. Dead. A widow swallowed by the sea. And yet here I was, heart pounding, mind sharp. "Power?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. Jake leaned forward, rough hands folded. "People don't look for ghosts. If they think you drowned, you've got a chance to move without them watching. Question is, what do you do with it?" I thought of Vanessa's whisper, the push, David's silence. I thought of my husband's empire, everything Robert had built, everything we had saved, falling into their hands, poisoned by their greed. "I don't know," I admitted, though inside, something hot was already forming. Jake sat back. "You got two choices. Walk away, start fresh somewhere far, let the sharks eat each other. Or," he let the word hang heavy, "you use the fact you're dead to even the score." Silence pressed the room until Tyler finally asked the question no one wanted to voice. "Do you want to go back to them?" I met his wide, uncertain eyes. No, I said slowly, feeling the truth settle in my bones. I want to bury them. The way they tried to bury me. The room shifted then, not physically, but in the way a storm cloud changes light. My trembling wasn't from cold anymore. It was resolve hardening in my chest. I wasn't just Margaret Harrison, grieving widow. I was Margaret Harrison, ghost. And ghosts don't beg for mercy. They haunt. The cemetery grass was slick with dew, shining like glass under a gray sky. I crouched behind the maintenance shed, binoculars pressed to my face, watching strangers grieve a woman who wasn't dead. The program bore my photograph, an image from 2 years ago where I looked soft, distracted, wineglass in hand. Perfect for their story, the declining widow who slipped too easily from this world. David stood at the casket, black suit cut sharp, expression even sharper. His voice trembled just enough to sell the part. My mother was confused, sometimes. But she was kind. And she loved us. The crowd murmured in sympathy. Vanessa dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief, squeezing his hand with such precision it could have been choreographed. Together they looked like devoted children, pillars of loss. I wanted to scream. You left me to drown. You're thieves. Murderers. But the only witness to my rage was Jake, crouched beside me with his own binoculars. They're good, he muttered. Too good. They were better than good. They had transformed my death into theater, each sob a calculated note. And it worked. The mourners leaned in, whispered condolences, wept for a family they thought was broken by tragedy. My neighbor Eleanor clutched tissues in both fists, shoulders shaking. Dr. Peterson, who'd fixed my hip, stood stiff and solemn. These people believed. They mourned. And it cut deeper than the cold sea ever had. Because they cared. And David, my own son, weaponized their kindness to crown himself the grieving heir. My chest tightened. For one trembling moment, I thought about stepping out, letting them see me alive. Imagine the gasp, the rush of bodies, the collapse of David's perfect mask. But Jake's hand closed over mine. Not yet. I swallowed, forcing air into my lungs. He was right. Too soon, and all I'd have was spectacle. I needed evidence, leverage, the kind of truth that can't be spun into lies. When the ceremony ended, I lowered the binoculars. David and Vanessa drifted through the crowd like politicians, hugging, nodding, accepting sympathy like it was currency. They kept anyone from asking too many questions, steering conversations away from details of my final hours. See who's missing? Jake asked quietly. I scanned again. My lawyer. My accountant. My advisor. All absent. The very people who should have been there, all conspicuously gone. A knot coiled in my stomach. They know more than they should. Or they're part of it, Jake said. The air felt suddenly thinner, harder to breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. It was conspiracy, woven tight around me while I smiled through family dinners. I closed the binoculars, slipping them into my bag. Then we find proof. And when I rise, it won't just be from the dead. It'll be to burn this to the ground. Jake gave a low whistle. Lady, you're scarier than the ocean. Good, I said, standing. Because the ocean spared me. They won't. The house smelled the same, cedar polish, faint rosewater, but it wasn't mine anymore. Their laughter carried from the kitchen, brittle and false, while I sat waiting in the armchair Robert had given me for our 20th anniversary. My hands rested calmly on the armrests, though every muscle buzzed with the memory of cold water and betrayal. The door opened. Keys clattered. David's voice, bright, rehearsed. I'll check the mail. then silence. He saw me first. He froze, lips parted, keys slipping to the hardwood. His face drained white, and for a second I saw the little boy who once begged me to leave the hallway light on. "Hello, darling," I said softly. "Miss me?" Vanessa entered behind him. She didn't scream this time. Her hand flew to her chest, breath caught, but her eyes sharpened fast, calculating. She had always been quicker than him. "You're dead," David whispered. "So I read," I replied. "Beautiful obituary. Very touching. Alzheimer's donations, what a thoughtful touch." I stood slowly, my hip aching but steady, and laid the folder on the coffee table. Photographs spilled out, surveillance shots of meetings, forged documents, bank records. Their conspiracy in black and white. "I was going to haunt you quietly," I said. But then I found Sarah Collins's name. 17. No family. Dead giving birth to the child you pretend is yours. David's knees bent, as if the weight of the name pressed him downward. Vanessa stayed rigid, mask intact. "Prove it," she hissed. "Oh, Vanessa." I lifted the small recorder from my pocket, its red light still glowing. "I don't have to prove it. You just did." Her mouth opened, then shut, as realization cut through her armor. David finally looked at me, truly looked, and his voice broke. "Mom, we didn't mean, you left me in the ocean," I snapped. The words cracked the room. Your hand stayed on the rail while she whispered about sharks. "Tell me, David, how many times did you practice my death before you found the courage to watch it happen?" Tears filled his eyes. His lips trembled with words he couldn't form. "I raised you," I said, my voice shaking now, rage and grief colliding. "I gave you everything. And you gave me to the sea." The door burst open before silence could swallow us. Agents stormed in, jackets dark, guns drawn, voices sharp with authority. "FBI. Nobody move." Vanessa's face fractured, panic replacing calculation. David stumbled backward into the wall. Agent Chen stepped forward, lifting the folder I'd spread across the table. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. We've been waiting for this." In the chaos, I felt it, the release. The weight sliding from my chest. For days I had carried the ocean inside me, its cold, its silence, its betrayal. Now the tide turned. They thought they'd buried me. But I had clawed my way back, and tonight, I buried them. The trial came and went in the way trials do, lawyers sparring, cameras flashing, names turned into headlines. David wept on the stand. Vanessa sharpened her voice to a blade. The jury took less than a day. Guilty. The words should have felt like triumph. Instead, they felt like silence, the same silence I'd known under the water when the Atlantic closed over me. Justice is not joy. It is survival, written down on paper. The network unraveled after Torres's arrest. I was told my testimony saved lives, though I will never know the faces of the people who might still be breathing because I spoke. That is the strange mercy of survival, you don't see its full reach. But I see him. In the mornings, sunlight spills across my kitchen table, and little Robert Sarah gurgles at the sound of his name. He is not a replacement for Robert, or for the son who betrayed me. He is himself, warm, alive, unburdened. I whisper his mother's name to him often, so he will never forget the girl who carried him into this world. Sometimes, when I hold him, I feel the pull of the ocean again. The moment of weightlessness before the fall. The shock of betrayal heavier than the water itself. But then he grips my finger with a fist so small, so certain, and the tide inside me recedes. I think of family differently now. It is not the blood that binds you, It is the hand that reaches into the water when you are drowning. It is strangers who become allies, friends who become anchors. David writes me letters from prison. I never open them. Let his words sink to the bottom of some forgotten drawer, the way he let me sink into the sea. I am not the woman they pushed overboard. I am not the ghost who watched her own funeral. I am something else now, something steadier, harder. The dead have nothing left to lose. And that is why I will never drown again.